had to be done. I had to protect them. You see, the darkness, it was coming. They wouldn't have understood, but they trusted me. They took the pudding. They went to sleep. And then, when I wrapped them, one by one, I told them it was just a long, beautiful dream. That we would all wake up together, safe. It was the only way to save their souls. And for weeks, I stayed with them. We were still a family.
Anthony and Megan Todt were the quintessential success story. They met in college, two ambitious physical therapists. They built a life in Colchester, Connecticut, founding a thriving physical therapy practice, Family Physical Therapy. They had the beautiful home, the loving family, the steady income. Anthony, or Tony, was known as a devoted father, often coaching his son's soccer teams, a pillar of his local community. Tony Todt's physical therapy practice was hemorrhaging money. He was caught in a sophisticated scheme of healthcare fraud, billing for services never rendered, stealing from the very people he swore to help. Federal agents, the FBI, had been investigating him for months. He was drowning in debt, over $100,000, facing eviction notices for properties and lawsuits from lenders. This looming destruction, the absolute ruin of his public image, was the engine that drove the tragedy. As his real world crumbled, Tony retreated into an increasingly dark and delusional mindset. The financial pressure, the fear of exposure, the loss of control, it all coalesced into a justification for an unthinkable act. He began speaking about the impending apocalypse, of a dark spiritual future for the world, and a need to be saved together. This was not just paranoia. It was the construction of a killer's rationalization. The fraud investigation meant his life was over. But in his mind, it meant his family's life had to end too. Authorities believe the killings occurred sometime around mid-December 2019. The process of the killings suggests a horrific, premeditated act of control. According to Tony's shifting accounts, he first drugged his wife and children with Benadryl. This sedative was administered in food, intended to render them helpless, to steal their final moments of clarity and resistance. The medical examiner's reports were brutal, though decomposition made definitive findings difficult. The initial drugging was followed by suffocation, and post-mortem stabbing wounds were found on Megan, Alexander, and Tyler. 4-year-old Zoe was also suffocated. In a final twisted ritual, each body was found with a crucifix clutched in their hands. Tony was attempting to frame this atrocity not as a murder, but as a religious sacrifice, a dark passing over to the other side to escape the apocalypse he believed was coming. After the murders, the world kept turning, but the Todt house became a tomb. For weeks, Tony Todt lived in the home, with the remains of his wife, his children, and the family dog, Breezy, who was also killed. Neighbors, now unnerved by the lack of activity, noticed packages piling up on the porch. The children's school went unanswered. The first alarm bell rang when relatives and friends couldn't get in touch with the family over the holidays. Then, a more official investigation began due to the looming FBI warrant for Tony Todt's financial fraud. The feds were closing in. On January 13, 2020, federal agents and sheriff's deputies converged on the Celebration home to serve the arrest warrant for Tony Todt. The smell hit them immediately, a thick, sickening odor of decay that permeated the very walls of the Disney-esque home. Inside, they found Anthony Todt. He was alive, but appeared weak, possibly from a recent suicide attempt using Benadryl. He initially told the deputies his wife was merely sleeping, but the truth was inescapable. The scene in the master bedroom was beyond description. The 4 bodies, Megan, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe, were found wrapped in blankets, tightly bound, and placed together in the room. The decomposition was severe. The perfect family was now a perfect horror show. Tony Todt was taken into custody immediately. In the interrogation room, Tony Todt's story began to pour out, contradictory and increasingly bizarre. The initial account was a full confession, a detailed, chilling narrative of how he had killed his entire family, driven by an apocalyptic vision. He told detectives about the murder-suicide pact, claiming he and Megan agreed they needed to die together to reach salvation. He claimed the children understood and agreed, telling him they wanted to die with their parents. He confessed to sitting on Zoe's bed for hours before finally suffocating her. This confession, filmed and later played for the jury, was damning. But the moment he was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of animal cruelty, the narrative shifted. From his jail cell, Todt penned a rambling 27-page letter to his father, effectively rewriting history. In this new version, the killer was not him, but his wife, Megan. He claimed that he had come home to find the children already dead, murdered by Megan with a Benadryl pudding pie. He asserted that Megan, obsessed with dark spiritual matters due to her own health issues, confessed to the killings before stabbing herself and dying in front of him. He claimed his initial confession was an attempt to cover for his wife, to protect her legacy, a desperate, absurd claim that flew in the face of all physical evidence. This shifting, self-serving testimony was the core of the defense at his 2022 trial. The trial was a gruesome dissection of the final days of the Todt family. Prosecutors laid out a clear case: financial ruin, a desperate need for control, and a final, brutal act of family annihilation. The defense painted Todt as a victim, a loving father manipulated by his suicidal wife, an innocent man who took the blame out of love. But the evidence of premeditation was overwhelming. The drugging, the bindings, the crucifixes, the fact that he was alive while his entire family was dead through weeks. The jury saw through the desperate lie. They listened to the video confession and the conflicting testimony. The financial fraud was revealed as the true, cold-blooded motive, a desperate act by a man who valued his reputation more than the lives of his wife and children. The jury returned its verdict. Anthony Todt was found guilty on all 4 counts of first-degree murder and the charge of animal cruelty. Circuit Judge Keith Karsten, in his sentencing, delivered a chilling rebuke, calling Anthony Todt a destroyer of worlds, and imposed 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional year for the cruelty to the family dog Breezy. Justice had been served, but the scars on the community of Celebration and the family who lost Megan, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe would remain forever. What makes a father, a physical therapist, a respected community member, capable of such a monstrous act? The truth may lie in a dark, generational trauma. 40 years before the massacre in Celebration, a young Anthony Todt, just 4 years old, was home in Connecticut when his father, Robert Todt, hired a hitman to kill his mother, Loretta. She was shot in the head, but miraculously survived. Robert Todt was convicted of attempted murder. Experts and observers cannot ignore this grotesque parallel. A father's attempt to end a family, witnessed by his son, who would decades later complete the generational cycle of violence. Did this early, unimaginable trauma, seeing his own father try to erase his mother, plant a seed of destruction in Anthony Todt's psyche? Did he see his life not as something to be cherished, but as something disposable, something controlled by a man's final, desperate act? Anthony Todt, the man who wanted to save his family from the apocalypse, only succeeded in bringing about his own. He is now confined to a prison cell, a monument to the terrifying capacity of a person to hide depravity behind a smiling, friendly face. The beautiful home on Reserve Place has been sold. The name Todt is forever etched into the history of Celebration, not as a symbol of the perfect family life it promised, but as a warning of the darkness that can lurk beneath the most flawless surface. 4 innocent lives and a family pet erased by the one person sworn to protect them. We want to hear your thoughts on this tragic case. Do you believe Anthony Todt's initial confession or his later claim that his wife was the killer? How much do you think the generational trauma of witnessing his father's violence influenced his own actions? Is the looming threat of financial ruin and public exposure a greater catalyst for an act like this than a genuine religious delusion? Leave your comments below and join the discussion. If you want to dive deeper into cases like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, be safe and remember to look beneath the surface.